because Senator Kavanaugh's away.
No, he's presenting a bill. I just saw a text from him. He'll be joining us shortly.
Great.
Ready to go?
Senator French, you are all set.
Very good. Welcome, everyone. I'm Harold French, Senator from District 7. Today, we will be holding a meeting of the Senate Commerce Committee. Before we get started, I'll read through a checklist to ensure that the meeting that we are holding is in compliance with the right to know law. As chair of the Commerce Committee, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12 pursuant to executive order 2020-4 and its extensions, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. In accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone, with additional access possible by video and other electronic means. We are utilizing Zoom for this electronic meeting. All members of the committee and selected and only selective legislative staff have the ability to communicate contemporaneously in this meeting through this platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously watch and or listen to the meeting on Zoom or YouTube and via phone by following the directions and links provided on the general court website. We have provided public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting in the Senate calendar. We are providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anyone has a problem, please email remotesenate@leg.state.newhampshire.us or call 603-271-6931. Once again, that's 603-271-6931. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, we will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting shall be done by a roll call vote. Finally, let's start the meeting by taking a roll call of attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state where they are and if anyone else is in the room with you during this meeting is required. The right to know law. Senator Bradley.
Good morning, Jeb Bradley, Wolfboro, and I'm alone.
Senator Gannon.
Senator Gannon in Sandtown, alone in my home office.
Senator Susie.
Good morning, Donna Susie. I am in Manchester in my home and I am alone.
And once again, I'm Harold French, Senator to District 7, broadcasting live from the office in Concord, New Hampshire. And Attorney Sullivan is in and out of the office. Senator Kavanaugh is in Florida and he will be joining us shortly. He is drying off. He was at the beach this morning, he said, sunning himself. And so he will be with us as soon as he can. We're gonna start off. We've got several bills today. I asked that we have a lot of people who want to speak, so please keep your comments to 3 minutes or so. We'll start off. I'll open House Bill 227. Relative to termination of tenancy at the expiration of the tenancy or lease term. And Cameron, do we have the prime sponsor with us?
We do. We have Representative Lynn.
Very good. Ask him in.
Representative Lynn, you should be able to unmute yourself there.
Yes, thank you very much, members of the committee. Can you hear me all right?
We can. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Bob Lynn. I'm a representative from Wyndham, and I was the sponsor of this bill. And I guess I should say at the outset, so that there's no question about this, I am not a rental property owner. I owned some rental property back in the 1980s, and for a period of a few years, it was I never had any trouble with my tenants. So I just sort of state that I should state that at the beginning. The intent of this bill is to overrule a Supreme Court decision, a non-constitutional Supreme Court decision. So there's no question the legislature has the authority to overrule it. That was decided in 2005, called Aimco Properties versus Diesowitz. It's reported at 152 New Hampshire 587. And essentially, what that case holds is that no matter what, if you make a lease with a tenant, if you're a landlord and you make a lease with a tenant and it says this is a 1-year lease, it's not, you can't evict the tenant at the end of the lease. It basically says that if you have a lease for a term, the term doesn't really mean anything because you can't evict the tenant at the end of the term unless there are some other grounds for eviction, like the tenant has been disruptive or damaged the property or failed to pay rent or something like that. It really, to be very honest about it, it doesn't make any sense. And in fact, in that case, this was decided long before I was a member of the Supreme Court, but in that case, Justice Netto, who is, a very well-respected judge. I'm talking about, both Justice Nettos are very well-respected, but this is the older Justice Netto who was on the Supreme Court, Joe Netto, a very well-respected judge and a Democrat, I should say, hardly some, right-wing extremist. He concurred specially in the case, basically concurred only because of procedural issues, but on the merits of the issue said this is kind of crazy. It basically means that if you enter into a lease for a term, the lease doesn't mean anything. When I first came across this case, when I got on the Supreme Court, to be honest with you, I was frankly shocked at the case. We have had some cases since then under the doctrine of stare decisis. As you may know, the court is not at liberty to just overrule a case just because it doesn't like it. So there are some other cases that have been decided that have relied on that case. But I remember saying to myself, if I was ever in a position to be able to have this case overruled, I would certainly do that. And now, having been elected to the legislature, I thought it was time to do this. I suspect if the hearing before you follows what happened in the House, you will probably hear from some people who have a different view on this, and I respect that we have differences of opinion. But one of the things you're likely to hear is that the housing market right now is extremely tight, and that this is a bad time to enact a bill like this. I would actually suggest to you that that exactly the opposite is true. Because one of the practical implications that you have to understand is the results from a bill from the law as it currently exists, is that landlords are unwilling or may be unwilling to take a risk with what I would refer to as sort of marginal tenants. If they sort of say to themselves, I'm not sure whether this person is going to sort of fit in, whether this person is going to be a good tenant or is going to have some problems or whatever. Right now, they have to say, when I make this decision, I better understand that unless I can prove, and this is I think you may hear from some other witnesses who will say that, just because disruption or damaging the property or whatever may be a reason for eviction that's separate from this, that can often be very hard to prove. Witnesses, other tenants, for example, may be reluctant to come forward and testify because they're concerned about their physical safety, or just living in an environment where they know that their neighbor hates them because they've testified against them or something like that. So it can be very difficult to actually prove one of the other grounds. And so, as getting back to my point, a landlord may very well say, if I decide to let this person that I'm not quite sure about, give them an opportunity to live in this rental property, it's not just for a year or whatever the term of the tenancy is. It may be perpetual. It may be that I can't get rid of this person. And so the landlord is likely to be much less inclined to want to take that risk, rather than being able to rely on the fact that at the end of the term of the lease, whether the tenant, has committed some other violation or not, the landlord can simply say, "I'm sorry, the term is over, and I'm not going to renew it." One of the things you'll notice in the bill is that it only applies to tenancies which have existed for 6 months or more. And The reason, logically, I don't necessarily think that logically it would make sense to have that, but I did agree with this aspect of the Aimco majority decision. If you have a really short lease, like a month to month or something like that, it probably is true that neither party to the lease really expects that it's not going to be renewed, assuming that there's no problem, at least for some period of time. So that's why I selected the 6-month term as being the term where this would kick in. So before 6 months, you couldn't just cancel the lease because the term had expired. You have to give the person at least 6 months. I thought that made sense. The House Judiciary Committee agreed. The one thing that the House Judiciary Committee added to the bill was a requirement of 30 days notice, which I have absolutely no problem with. I didn't put that in originally in the draft because I thought that there was already a 30-day notice requirement. And I still think there is, but this being redundant is not a problem in this circumstance. I thought there was already a 30-day requirement in RSA 540:3 Roman numeral 2. But nonetheless, I had no problem at all with what the House Judiciary Committee added as the 30-day period. So, and to sum up, I think that this bill really is required by basic fairness. It simply says that our contract law, contracts mean what they say. If a contract is for a year or 6 months or 3 years or whatever, when the contract is over, it's over. That's all that this bill really says. And I hope that you will consider it and act favorably upon it as the House Judiciary Committee did. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative. So I have a couple of questions. First, as you said, a lease is a contract between two or more parties. And all contracts have terms and conditions. And the term for termination of the lease is considered part of the consideration of the agreement between the two parties, correct?
Sure, I think that's right. I think I think basically all of the terms, unless something was really completely immaterial, all of the terms would be considered, yes.
So if a landlord is creating a lease with a tenant, why would they have any dates at all other than the term to be mutually agreed upon at some time in the future between all parties?
Well, I guess, I mean,
that's what this, without this, that's what it amounts to, doesn't it?
well, I mean, yeah, in effect, I suppose that's true. I mean, you could say that without this, under the current law, if the tenant were not willing to leave, or did not mutually agree with the landlord to leave, then the tenant could not be evicted. Until the tenant agreed to leave. I would be surprised if most landlords would be willing to enter into an agreement like that. And frankly, I don't think I've ever seen a lease that was just, didn't have a termination point.
Right. Okay, thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much, Representative.
Thank you very much.
Cameron?
Next is Elliott Barry. Elliott, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Elliott Barry. I'm the Director of Housing Justice at New Hampshire Legal Assistance, where I have been representing tenants for over 40 years. One thing that I think is absolutely critical for everyone to understand is for most tenants, and especially seniors, people who are disabled, low and moderate income families, this apartment that they rent is their home, and they don't have any intention of living there only 6 months or a year. If they did, they'd leave. They sign a 1-year lease for one reason, or 6-month lease. That's what the landlord gives them. And it's not like a commercial tenancy where the parties have relatively equal bargaining power so that a tenant can get a long-term lease and everybody will be happy with that. This is a take it or leave it proposition. And on that basis, all sorts of contracts have limited application. And the law recognizes those kinds of contracts can be extremely problematic. But also keep in mind that under our law as it exists now, a carefully tailored law, as soon as that lease is over, a landlord can evict for other good cause, which is any legitimate reason. And that's explicit in the statute. It could be that the tenant will not agree to a rent increase. It could be that the landlord wants to renovate the property. It could be that a prospective buyer requires a unit be vacant, or the landlord wants a close family member to move in. If someone signs a 6-month lease and doesn't leave, should they leave? If the landlord is simply going to turn around and rent the unit to another tenant, why should the tenant who's there lose their home simply because for no apparent reason? If the landlord is not going to re-rent the unit, then that's other good cause. So and what is the purpose of the lease? The lease will lock in first of all, the rent. So both parties know how much rent is legally owed throughout the tenancy. And secondly, it locks in all sorts of obligations and rights in both sides. If the bill passes, 6-month leases will become increasingly common, just so landlords have the option of ending a tenancy without good cause. People shouldn't have to leave their homes without a good reason. It's an invitation for an eviction for a simple argument between landlord and tenant, for a child being a little noisy, as kids are from time to time. Perhaps, and I've seen this a number of times, quirky but harmless behavior by a person with mental health issues, or that the landlord simply doesn't like the tenant. That should never be a reason to force a tenant out of his home, particularly not in this housing market. In this market that we've had for years, families and individuals who are evicted often have to leave their community entirely, meet loss of access to physicians, mental health care providers, childcare, and sometimes it even causes a loss of a job. And all too often, of course, it results in homelessness, which is a total disruption of life in which an individual often or sometimes never recovers. Eviction also makes finding a new apartment much more difficult. Why? Because it goes on the record, but guess what the record doesn't show? The record doesn't show what the reason for the eviction was. The landlord only sees that the tenant was evicted. In this case, it would be for no fault. House Bill 227 basically says that every 6 months, the landlord has an opportunity to arbitrarily get rid of a tenant, and that's not what the law is for. Let me just ask you this. If you had, most of you are homeowners, you have a mortgage. What if the mortgage said every 6 months or every year, we'll give you your money back, but we're going to foreclose on the mortgage and you have to leave? Is that reasonable security for somebody to deal with in their housing? I don't think so. And I think tenants are entitled to some reasonable amount of security as are homeowners. Finally, I want to say that some major landlords have written you all to express their opposition to HB 227. Stewart Property Management manages 3,000 units in New Hampshire. And he wrote as follows: the current law is a reasonable component of the checks and balances in the landlord-tenant relationship. Termination for no cause can be a mechanism to manifest an impermissible bias, personal animus, or provide a shield against fair housing exposure, or a means of not addressing residents' issues as they arise. A no-cause non-renewal allows owners to ignore code violations when they occur and simply wait until the lease expires. These same views have been expressed by Steve Lewis and Company, a management company over 200 units, NeighborWorks of Southern New Hampshire, Families in Transition, Southwest Community Services. The bill has also been opposed in writing by the Local Welfare Administrators Association and Mayor Charlene Lovett of Claremont. The bill, I understand that in a perfect world, in a logical world where housing was plentiful and bargaining power somewhat equal, then this law would make sense. But that simply is not the world we live in. In the world we live in, no tenant should lose their home unless there's good cause. And remember, good cause doesn't have to be anything the tenant did wrong. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Barry. Any questions from the committee members? Senator Kavanaugh from Florida.
Thank you, Senator French. And it is Senator Kavanaugh in Florida, not at the beach, just having some technical difficulties. But I am alone in the room, sadly, in Florida. So, Mr. Barry, I do have a question. I just kind of want to touch base on this. If I own a rental property now, I have a lot of constituents in Hooksett that own property in Manchester that are rentals. If I have that, if I own a property and have a year lease and my tenant is, for whatever reason, someone in my family needs a place to live. And if I want to end that lease after the lease is completed after a year, say, I could still do that. Can I still do that as a landowner, a property owner?
Yeah, absolutely. You would give them a 30-day eviction notice and you'd check the box for other good cause, and you would say your family member wants to move in. I want my family member to reside in the premises. That would be other good cause, and it happens on a regular basis.
So what does this bill does it do to enhance that or make this worse?
That doesn't affect anything. It just, what the bill does is say, for the first time since 2005, the bill simply says that all a landlord has to do to evict doesn't even have to put a reason on the eviction notice other than expiration of the lease. In your example, the extra thing that this requires is that you put why you're not renewing the lease, which is you want your mother-in-law to move in. If you want your mother-in-law to move in,
Let's not go crazy, Mr. Barry.
And by the way, Representative Lynn mentioned the dissent in the Jevons decision. It isn't important to point out that 4 out of the 5 justices, who I don't think are radicals by any means, supported the decision. So again, you have the authority to change it, but I hope you won't.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Barry.
Thank you.
Cameron?
Okay, up next is Tara Reardon. Tara, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman French and members of the Senate Commerce Committee. Good morning, thank you. My name is Tara Reardon. I work for the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund, and I'm the director of a program called ROC-NH. And that means I work with New Hampshire's 136 resident-owned manufactured housing communities representing over 8,000 households here in the state of New Hampshire. Prior to that work, I practiced law, specializing in real estate and financing. I did a lot of landlord-tenant writ, and I always represented landlords in those cases. And I also spent 7 terms in the House of Representatives, always on the Commerce Committee, and 2 years as chair of the House Commerce Committee. I want to point out today that New Hampshire RSA 540 is not the only eviction statute. There is also an eviction statute at RSA 205A that deals with manufactured housing parks and evictions in those, and it mirrors the language of 540. Like 540, it lists reasons for eviction, as you've heard: non-payment of rent, damage to the property, repeated conduct that disturbs the other tenants, and failure to comply with written rules. The manufactured housing statute also provides for a change of use in the property, but 540, the one you're talking about, also provides for any other legitimate business or economic reason, as you've heard already. Any other legitimate reason seems to cover it and has always covered it in my practice in landlord-tenant law. And I'm also worried, as Elliott Barry pointed out, what those other reasons are that are outside of legitimate economic and business reasons that you would want to displace a tenant from their home, is what we're talking about here. The manufactured housing statute has been in place for nearly 50 years, just shy of 50 years. And it has worked exactly like you expect an eviction statute has. As Representative Lynn mentioned, we're at the lowest rental vacancy rate almost ever in the state of New Hampshire. At a time when I and everybody I know in the housing industry is trying to make housing more secure for residents, this is not the time to change the statute or public policy about giving landlords, again, not an era of even bargaining, an advantage over tenants. It just creates more instability in this sector. Imagine every 6 months knowing whether you're going to be out of your home or not, particularly for the reasons and outside of the scope of legitimate business and economic reasons. One other thing I'd like to point out is local elected officials know the burden will fall on individual cities and towns as required by New Hampshire RSA 165.1 to find and provide housing for citizens that have none. I'd like to caution the committee against the further expansion of eviction in this manner and leave 540 to work as it has for years very well. And I'd be happy to answer any questions for the committee or be a resource for the committee in the future if they have more questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Great to hear from you today. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you, Tara.
Okay, next is Alyssa Margolin. Alyssa, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Alyssa Margolin. I serve as Director of Housing Action New Hampshire. We're a statewide coalition of 80 organizations united around affordable housing and ending homelessness in the Granite State. Our members include those who develop, manage, own, and finance affordable rental housing. They are, in fact, key partners as our state works to increase its commitment to take on the shortage of affordable rental units for our state's workforce. As been noted, while on its face, allowing an expiration of a lease term to be grounds for eviction may seem innocuous, we have concerns about resulting housing destabilization as our state transitions out of the pandemic emergency and as the eviction moratoria come to an end. There will be an undoubted surge in evictions in our state. When this happens, one of our state's greatest economic vulnerabilities will come into full view: the insufficient number of affordable rental units. There's simply not enough available units to handle a redistribution of families at this time who would end up evicted as a result of this major change in law. To assert that such a change would open up opportunities for tenants with challenging history seems to fall short, and certainly any minor benefit here is likely outweighed by statewide destabilization. We hope that you find this inexpedient to legislate. In this case, we would say that inexpedient is more than a term of art. It is truly inexpedient at this time. With that, I'll conclude my testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much. Cameron?
The next person I have is Chris Norwood. If you're here, Chris, can you raise your hand? If you're in the Zoom, there's a little raise hand. Oh, there you are. Okay. All right, Chris, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Yes, 4, 5.
All right, great. I'm getting head nods. Thank you, everyone, for your availability today, and thank you, staff, for putting this together on Zoom. I am Chris Norwood. I'm the president of NAI Norwood Group, a commercial real estate brokerage firm. But today I'm speaking to you in my role as the volunteer chair of the Public Policy Committee for the New Hampshire Association of Realtors. We are speaking in support of HB 227 as amended, and we think that it was a reasonable compromise that came out of the House deliberations. Oh, say that 5 times fast. I don't want to repeat anything that's been said. I think that everyone understands what we're referencing here today. In general, we just feel that this bill, which would echo what good cause is and echo that good cause can be the expiration of a lease term, is fair and reasonable. The amended version of House Bill 227 would allow the landlord to evict at the end of the written lease term, and it would have no effect on other tenancies at will or so-called month-to-month tenancies, which we believe is important. We do think that, and under this bill, the landlord must still take the tenant to court to evict. And so we stand here in support of HB 227 and would certainly entertain any questions, but wanted to keep things brief for all of you this morning.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee members? Senator Susie?
Yes, just one if I may, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Norwood, there was testimony given previously that indicated that if this law were to pass with the 6-month language, it would be likely that most leases going forward would become 6-month leases and force greater concern and instability in the housing market. I wonder if you could speak to that.
Thank you, Senator Susie, for the question. I don't know as if I agree with that statement, if all new leases would be 6-month leases. The majority of the multifamily properties in which I encounter, you have a variety of tenants, most of whom who have been in that spot for 6 to 10 years, you know, and it's not an exaggeration to say that this happens in many communities where folks have been living there forever. And I certainly would not contest Mr. Barry if he were to say that there were cases that was not in circumstance. But I do think the default will continue to be the 1-year lease. Of course, many landlords and tenancies prefer the tenancy at will statute. And because we do see at the end, the conclusion of many leases, both landlord and tenant default to that, not default, but they would select that because it provides both parties with flexibility beyond. I hope that answers the question, Senator.
Thank you. Yes.
Anyone else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cameron?
The next person I have is Jessica Margson. Jessica, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. Good morning. My name is Jessica Margson. I've done volunteer housing advocacy with Granite State Organizing Project since 2008, for 13 years now. And I first want to start with apologizing for my allergy voice. So bear with me, especially when I get excited about something. And I strongly oppose this bill. So I'd like to start with saying that I strongly oppose HB 227. And the reasons are the protections of this bill go above and beyond the scope of which our state statutes intend to apply. Hotels have turnaround. Housing should not. Housing is to live. If someone wants to be somewhere only for a short period of time, we have plenty of other housing options for that. People and families save up a large amount of money. They invest a lot. They sometimes have to change schools, modes of transportation, doctors, you name it, just when they have to move. So it's a huge disruption to many people. The only time this bill is good is for a landlord. Risk is inherent to being a landlord, and we cannot enact bills based on fear of the risk that's already inherent to what they started. 1 second. I have so many notes for this one. But basically, give me 1 second. I'm sorry. I know we have a lot to go over.
You've got 3 minutes. You've got plenty of time.
Thank you. Landlords enter into a lease to make money. State statutes provide protections for the landlord in case of damage already and for non-payment. If there's damage to the property, we have things in place with 540 for them to protect themselves. If they're not paying, we have plenty of protections already in place. This only protects the whims of the landlord. As stated before, if for whatever reason, they can just go ahead and choose to have the tenant move. And when you do, and it's been stated, and it is a valid reason, at our low rate, where are people going to move? They're going to be displaced. And the huge reason we can't do this is the state of New Hampshire does not have enough protections in place and enough affordable housing. I was an alternate on the Affordable Housing Task Force in Manchester this summer. And the numbers we went over about the amount of affordable apartments needed, it's not even attainable currently to get the numbers of affordable housing we need. So we can't make the waters worse for them. There's no safeguards out there that our state has put out there for them. So if we make the rental market that much harder to maintain housing, our homeless population is going to skyrocket. We're going to have families and children displaced, kids moving schools constantly. It's not safe. There's enough protections already in place in 540, and I believe HB 227 wipes out half of them instantly. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Cameron?
The next person I have is Lydia Yen. Lydia, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, my name is Lydia Yen, and I'm a new renter. I just rented, or I'm renting an apartment starting in March. I have been discriminated against in my search for an apartment. To many landlords, I am seen as someone they can't trust. I'm young and I've never rented an apartment before. And because of that reason alone, I was denied a couple apartments that I actually met the requirements for. Eventually, I did find a landlord who decided to take a chance on me. New Hampshire is experiencing a housing crisis, and renters are no exception. This problem is exacerbated by the impacts of COVID-19 on our communities. This bill will make it easier for landlords to discriminate against their tenants. If a tenant is paying rent and hasn't violated the lease, what reason does the landlord have to evict them? Does the landlord generally not like the person? Even so, as long as they're paying rent and following the lease terms, there is no reason to evict them. This bill is immoral. The only reason why I think this bill is being introduced is because it's meant to protect the personal preference of landlords. If they don't like a tenant for whatever reason that has nothing to do with the lease agreement, they will be able to evict them without repercussions. And with the housing crisis we are experiencing, it could take months for the tenant to find another place to live. This bill will add to our housing crisis and cause unnecessary worry about getting evicted, especially for new renters like myself who have finally found a place to live. I am asking you to please oppose HB 227.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
The next person I have is Keith Tebow. Keith, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me all right?
We can. Go right ahead.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony today. My name is Keith Tebow. I represent Southwestern Community Services. With a community action agency that serves Cheshire and Sullivan counties. We provide social human services throughout this region. I have been doing so since 1965. In the early 1990s, SCS began a program of creating, developing, owning, managing affordable housing throughout the region. We have close to 500 units of housing of various types throughout the region, and we certainly oppose House Bill 227. Should it be instituted, this would allow most landlords who utilize leases to evict a tenant just upon the termination date of a lease, as we've been discussing, with no cause except for that date. This could have severe consequences to renters, and particularly those at the lower income scale. Those people, the majority of the housing in New Hampshire is out of reach of them. So they're already behind an 8 ball. If they're like seeking housing, just from an income perspective, the majority of housing, single family or rental in New Hampshire, is going to be out of their reach. We find this problematic, this legislation problematic, and really for two primary reasons. First, in our opinion, this would give unilateral control of an eviction to any landlord utilizing a lease. In effect, this gives the landlord powers that were really formerly only allocated to a judge, an unbiased third party. The power to evict is not to be taken lightly. We're talking about homes, children, individuals, people who are frail. A senior trying to move in 30 days, can just imagine yourselves having to find another place to live in 30 days through no reason of your own. The power to put an individual, a family, children out of their home needs to be wielded by an objective third party who can weigh the reasons and justifications for such a powerful and impactful decision. Second consideration that we feel needs to be considered is really what a lease means, both to a landlord and a tenant. There are benefits and responsibilities within a lease for both parties. For a landlord, the lease provides a means to outline and enforce his or her rules of occupancy. It gives the landlord appropriate rights as it pertains to their property, primarily designed to protect the property from damage or other detrimental behavior leading to the loss of that landlord's value of that landlord's property. For the resident, the lease is a security instrument. It ensures that if certain behaviors and responsibilities are fulfilled, they will remain in control of an asset. Because whether even they realize it or not, a lease, especially to a lower moderate income household, is maybe the only true asset that they have. A safe, secure, and affordable home with the right to live there, secured by a lease, outlining acceptable behavior and reasonable expectations, is a powerful and real asset to a family. Allowing a landlord to strip a family of this asset for really no good cause is not acceptable. A good lease works both ways. Should an eviction become necessary, it absolutely should be adjudicated by a judge, not unilaterally decided by one of the parties to that lease in question. So as an advocate for the less fortunate and a local landlord, we oppose House Bill 277. Appreciate your time and certainly will make myself available for any questions anyone might have. Thanks again.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you very much.
Cameron?
The next person I have is Angela Zhang. Angela, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, members of the Senate Commerce Committee and members of the public. Thank you very much for your time today. My name is Angela Zhang, and I am the Programs Director at Listen Community Services. We're a social services agency based in Lebanon, and our mission is to support New Hampshire residents within Lower Grafton County and Upper Sullivan County region with their critical needs such as housing, food, and heat. And I'm here today to speak in opposition to House Bill 227. I'd like to share with you a story about one of our clients whom we're working with, and we just met her last week. Names and identifying details have been changed to ensure her privacy. Emma is a single mom with 3 kids. Last year, she moved to Sullivan County to escape a domestic violence situation. Despite being a good tenant who always paid her rent on time, her landlord decided that he wanted to fix the house and sell it, so she has to leave when her lease is up. After searching for months for a new place, the only apartment she could find is almost 20 miles away and with higher rent. It means she will have to leave her current job and will need to rely on welfare to get through this transition. She's saving every penny she has in order to save up for the $2,500 she needs for her first month's rent and security deposit. And one of the most upsetting things for her family is the fact that her daughter, who had just gotten really settled into her school and had made lots of friends there, will be uprooted and have to start all over again at a new school district. Now, this may count as a good cause eviction, but nevertheless, the plight of families who are facing evictions is more daunting now than ever before. With a 1.8% vacancy rate in New Hampshire, this is the tightest housing market that we've ever seen as real estate prices continue to climb due to lack of construction and houses being snapped up by out-of-state buyers. Even if a family can't afford the rising rent of an apartment, it can take months to find one. We are years from recovering from the worst recession and job market of our lifetimes, and so many families have lost income and burned through all of their savings to make it through. For many people like Emma, saving up for first month's rent and security deposit is harder than ever and wouldn't be possible at all without external help. If HB 227 was passed, we are guaranteed to see a surge in evictions and homelessness, especially in this housing market. Housing insecurity disproportionately impacts seniors, people with disabilities, and people who are low income, and they would also struggle the most to find new housing as well. The reality is, if a family falls into homelessness right now, they will likely stay there for months as they try to find a new home. This has all kinds of negative impacts on physical and mental health for years to come, especially on children's growth and development. And even if you don't care about the human impact, the cost of supporting individuals and families overwhelmingly is borne by the public in terms of welfare, city and town governments, and our healthcare system. There are already plenty of reasons why landlords can evict tenants for good cause. But if this bill is passed and landlords are able to evict any tenant at the end of their lease just for the sake of evicting, our housing crisis will only get drastically worse. That's why the best thing we can do is to prevent evictions now from happening in the first place. We hope that you will do the right thing to protect families such as Emma's and oppose HB 227. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee members? Staff? Nope. Thank you very much. Cameron?
The next person I have is Nick Norman. Nick, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the committee once again. A reminder, I work with the landlords across the state of New Hampshire with legislative updates that go out to about 4,000 landlords statewide. I'm very plugged into anything landlord-tenant law going through the legislature. I'd be very happy at the end to take questions and invite questions. Couple things I guess I would say. This is really about the situation that happens for landlords. You heard the sponsor mention it. This is a real situation that goes on, that there are some very bad acting tenants in apartments, and it can be very hard to evict them. Although there is a ground to evict someone for not following the lease terms, for lease violations, it can be very hard to prove that in a court of law. I've talked with many real estate specialist attorneys about situations like we have suspected in one of our apartments right now, someone dealing drugs. How do you prove it? It's very hard to prove. We call the police essentially do nothing about it. And the real estate specialist attorney tells me that actually it's almost impossible to evict someone for that reason, because you can't prove it in court. So there are other serious lease violations that can happen that's hard to prove. Noise complaints. People smoking in the apartment. How do you prove someone's smoking? We've had that issue before. So the only thing that this will affect is the very bad paying tenants. No landlord is going to evict a good tenant that's a paying tenant that's not causing any issues. That would be silly. It's bad business. You would never evict a tenant that's a good tenant. The only people that will be affected by this are the very bad paying tenants. There was a question about 6-month leases. In my world, there's no way that this would increase the number of 6-month leases. It's bad business for me to take a lease less than a year. If I take a lease less than a year, I'm losing money, because every time a tenant moves out, there's tenant turnover costs. And it's pretty healthy. A couple other things, let me just make sure I've got everything. Every landlord wants a long-term tenant. Our company has tenants that have been there for 20 years, 6 years, 5 years. It's very common to see a long-term tenant. We're not looking for getting rid of tenants. The only tenant that we would ever want to evict is someone that's causing tremendous problems at the property. And this would allow that to happen in those situations where you can't prove things in court. There would be no surge in evictions. Once again, the only thing this would be used for is those very bad acting tenants. I would be very, very happy to take questions. I'm very experienced in the landlord industry and talk with many landlords and real estate specialists.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Norman.
Thank you.
Cameron?
The next person I have signed to speak is Stephen Kidder. Stephen, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you all so much. Can you all hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much. So my name is Stephen Kidder. I live in Concord. And I strongly oppose HB 227. I, like some folks on this call, was recently able to acquire my first apartment. And I found out pretty soon after that the political beliefs between me and my landlord are very different. And we have gotten in spats before around our political beliefs. And I'm worried about a bill like this passing because my landlord could think of me as a bad actor because of the fact that my political beliefs don't align with him. And what that will set up for is just a world, a community of discrimination around, and this will also have a profound impact on poor folks, on Black, Indigenous people of color, because bad actors is one thing, but how do we know that a landlord is acting of good faith? Like, oh, well, I don't like this person. I don't like this person's political beliefs. I don't like this person's religion or their food they're cooking. Like, I think it just can snowball in a way that I think is really, really, really abominable. So I strongly urge y'all to oppose HB 227. Thank you so much. And I'm open to questions, but thank you so much.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Gear. Cameron?
The last person that I have signed up to speak is Martha Stone. Martha, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. I will try not to be repetitive with some of the other remarks you've heard and keep my comments very brief. So I am the executive director of Crossroads House, which is one of our state's largest emergency shelter providers in the state. In addition, Crossroads House is also a landlord, as we own some units of permanent housing. I wanted to sign up to speak this morning to speak against HB 227. And I really just feel strongly, as others have noted, that we need to preserve tenant protections. As you've heard from others, landlords still have a full range of reasons why they can evict for good cause or with appropriate notice. As you all, I'm sure, are aware, the situation for people who are renting is already extremely challenging given our affordable housing crisis. Our state has a shortage of 20,000 units of rental housing. And, you know, despite what some others have said, I do believe that this could lead to more people experiencing homelessness if they were evicted and did not have the means to secure another apartment. Demand is already great on the state's emergency shelter providers. Currently in our shelter, we have between 70 and 80 people each night. That includes men, women, and families with children. And we do believe that when the eviction moratorium is ended on June 30th, that there could potentially be another surge, which would be a demand on our shelter providers. One trend I just wanted to mention, which is disturbing from our perspective, is that the length of time that people are having to stay in shelters when they cannot find an apartment is steadily increasing. I've tracked this for many years, and currently the length of stay in an emergency shelter for us is 103 days. And that trend is significantly increasing. Which is not good, because every day that someone is stuck in an emergency shelter, they're taking up a bed that is needed by someone else. This is all very interconnected between a person's ability to go out and rent an apartment. Many people who are staying in shelters are working. So it's not as if they're not working and don't have an income, but given the extremely low vacancy rate in our region in the Seacoast, it's 1%. The skyrocketing prices and landlords who are not always willing to work with someone even with a housing voucher, it's an extremely competitive environment for someone looking to rent. So I see this bill as something that would remove a protection, which is really important. And back to where we started with hearing Elliott Barry's testimony, an apartment is someone's home. And I think it's really important that we preserve the right for people to stay in that home, reduce the chance that they could be evicted for some reason outside of the good cause that's already included in the current laws, and be able to just offer them the protections, because a landlord with all those other resources and reasons can evict someone if they have a good cause. So I will end there, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Stone.
Thank you.
So that is everyone that I had signed up to speak. If anyone else
See if anyone else out there would like to.
Yeah, if anyone else would like to speak, you can raise your hand. On the phone, you can dial *9, or there's a little raise hand button on the Zoom. There are a couple of hands. I have Representative Lynn to speak for a second time. Jessica Margson to speak for a second time, and it looks like Sarah Noy to speak for a first time.
Bring Representative Lynn back. It's still sunny.
Okay, Representative Lynn.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to make 3 quick points. I know the committee is very busy, and I'll just make 3 quick points. First thing I want to say is one of the speakers in opposition to the bill suggested that somehow if this bill were to pass, it would eliminate the courts from being involved in the eviction process. That is absolutely not true. Under this bill, if a landlord terminates the lease at the end of the term, for this reason, just like for any other reason, if the tenant doesn't leave, the landlord can't just go in with a truck and move them out. The landlord has to go to court to get an eviction order. So this is no different than any other grounds for eviction. The second point I'd make very quickly is I think you'll notice that many of the sort of housing people who are rental property owners who have testified against this tend to be the bigger ones. And so they own really a lot of units. And so for them, it may be that if there's a tenant that's sort of a problem, but they're not going to be able to prove that they can evict them on some other grounds. Well, it's a cost of doing business. They've got so many other rental units that it's not a big problem. But a smaller landlord, this can be a really big problem, because if there's a tenant like that, that may cause other tenants to leave, and a smaller landlord may have a real problem with something like that. And the last point I would make is this: part of what you have to grapple with here, it seems to me, is what's your inclination on landlords? If you believe, as some people have suggested, that they're likely to use this as an excuse to evict people for discriminatory reasons or for no reasons, or if that's what you think that landlords are like, that generally that's the way they behave, then by all means you should oppose this bill. But if you believe, as I do, that landlords they're not like that. Most landlords, the overwhelming majority of landlords, are good, honest, hardworking businessmen who would have absolutely no reason to want to evict a tenant, just for no reason, as on a whim. Then I think this bill makes perfectly good sense for the reasons that the supporters, including myself, have said. So again, I hope you'll give it favorable consideration. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Thank you, Representative. That it, Cameron?
No, there are a few more hands raised.
Please don't repeat. If you're going to be talking, please don't repeat anything we've already heard.
Okay, speaking for a first time, we have Sarah Noy. Sarah, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Oh, I understand what happened. I'm sorry. It grabbed someone else's name. My name is Erin Dibacco, Aron Dibacco, and I'm calling as a person who lives in New Hampshire and who wants to have a stable economy in which our friends, families, and neighbors can trust that their homes are safe and then go out and, yeah. You asked me not to repeat. So you've heard this, you've heard the stories, you've heard what people say. This matters. It matters because these are our friends, these are our neighbors, these are our coworkers. This could be us if the circumstances fall the right way. And while I understand the need for landlords to protect their other tenants and their property, I also know that implicit bias is a real problem in human nature. It's the reason we've been having such a difficult conversation about policing. It is not the only place it shows up, and I am very concerned about this gut feeling as a basis for deciding to disrupt someone's home. Eviction is not trivial. It destroys a person's credit rating. It makes it very difficult for them to find other housing, even if that housing were available. And everything else I wanted to say has been said better by those who have come before me. Thank you.
Thank you very much for speaking today. Cameron?
Next, speaking for the first time, we have Sarah Jane. Sarah, you should be able to unmute.
Sure, thank you. My name's Sarah Jane Canoy, and I live in Manchester, Ward 1. I've already written to Senator Kevin Kavanaugh about my feelings about this bill. I'm speaking today to represent the Granite State Interfaith Action Fund, which is the state's largest association of faith communities and people of faith working for a just world. We are very much against this bill. As you've heard already today, there's a severe housing shortage in the state of New Hampshire, and increasing the rate of evictions will definitely increase the number of homeless people and the amount of requests for emergency help. Our faith communities are already overburdened helping people with things they can't afford to help people with, and this bill is something that we hope that you will defeat. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cameron?
The last hand that I have raised, speaking for a second time, Jessica Margerson.
I thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be able to object and rebut to a few things I did here. First, I want to state we have protection, smaller landlords have protections under, if you read definition 540(1)(a), non-restricted landlords means all real property for non-restricted purposes, which includes rental units in an owner-occupied building containing a total of 4 units or less, single-family houses, or single-family houses if the owner of such a house does not own more than 3 single-family houses at any one time. These are the small landlords that are referenced, and they already have protections to where they can evict at the end of the lease. They don't have to renew because they are a non-restricted landlord. That's already taken care of. This bill does not offer those protections that are already there. So then you have, just as Nick Norman stated, they feel that they can't prove drug dealing going on. They can go ahead and prove that the company they keep causes problems to the building. There are plenty of other good cause avenues, as Elliott Barry had stated before, that can be used for that. But what it does open up is, just as you cannot prove drug dealing, you cannot prove discrimination easily. This opens the gamut for landlords to discriminate on any basis they want by easily being able to evict this way. And it's the burdens on the tenant to try and prove that. So that is a huge thing I wanted to make sure to bring up. Thank you. Oh, and that we also that was mentioned by the previous person to speak before we opened it up again. The people that are out there right now with 3 months of rent, with the new protections they have with the CARES Act money, tenants currently in this position have 3 months of rent to go out and get an apartment with. I have tenants that can't find a place for months now still, even with having 3 months to put down. So that is how bad it is right now to trying to find somewhere affordable. So you're going to go ahead and make a move. Move where? Thank you.
Thank you. That it, Cameron?
Senator French, I do not see any more hands.
Very good. Then I'll close this hearing on House Bill 227. What do we allot? 10 minutes for that bill, Aaron? Yeah.
15, yeah.
15.
Just a little
Right
more.
on. Right on.
I tried to be exact, so maybe we should have done 17. I will now open House Bill 384.
Okay, the prime sponsor is Representative Wolper. Let me see. I saw him earlier. Let me see. There he is. All right. Whoops. People are moving around on me.
Senator Gannon, could you take over for a minute?
I'd love to.
Thank
All right,
you.
Kurt, Representative, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Go ahead, Representative. Welcome to Senate Commerce. Or maybe soon. How are we doing, Cameron?
I've asked him to unmute.
There we go.
There he goes.
I got it.
Okay, we're there. Welcome, Representative.
Thank you. Good morning. It's my pleasure to appear before the Commerce Committee
with a bill that was in the almost the same, well, so let me just begin. This is a bill about location privacy. And it's our intent with this bill to give the individual control over sharing of their location information from anybody who provides them services. So there's lots of places, things that you use. Your cell phone is constantly tracking your location so it can go from tower to tower, and you give them permission to do that. If you go on to I don't know, Map My Walk is an app that I had, and it just tracked how I walked, and it was a fitness app, right? I give them permission to track my location for the purpose of whatever it is, that service that they're providing to me. We believe that that information should be kept, I want to call it confidential. I am not giving them my location information so they can sell it to a travel agency or a cruise company or somebody who's marketing shoes. Right? That isn't why I give them my location information. And the assemblage of all of these different pieces of information in the digital world constitute give them an ability to know more about me or you than you know yourself. Virtually. They can tell when you went to the hairdresser, where you had dinner. They practically can tell you what you had for dinner. Right? This is not right. We don't have any privacy when all of that can be assembled, and location information is a very key part of all of this. So this is the, I want to say, third attempt at this bill. Last year, we had bipartisan support. I had a bill in the House. I co-sponsored a bill with Senator Shanley. The two bills ended up being very different. The bill in the House passed overwhelmingly on voice votes. The bill in the Senate was recommended ought to pass and then got tabled in the COVID stuff. So now we're back. And what you have in front of you is kind of a combination of the two bills. My bill in the House was quite narrow. Senator Shanley's bill was quite a bit broader, and that's where I've taken this bill. Once again, it has bipartisan sponsorship, but we just tried to cast the net a lot broader in this bill. We could walk through parts of it. The definitions are very broad, talking about anybody that provides you services or anything like that. If you give them an explicit consent, which we almost always do, they gather your information. And all it says is they can't share that. They can't sell it. They can't give it away. They can keep it for the purpose for which you give it to them, and that's what they can do with it. Now, obviously that creates issues when law enforcement wants to work or there are emergency situations. Those things are excluded from the bill, right? They just aren't covered. Well, it explicitly says this does not apply to those situations. We felt like it had to have a penalty. So this one has a penalty of $1,000 for a violation and $10,000 per person for repeated violations. The penalty I had last year was much more severe, and so we went with the lesser that Senator Shanley proposed. You're going to hear a lot from the Tenant people about how impossible it is to deal with laws in different states, and oh, you can't do this to us because we got to have a federal law. And I agree, it would probably be good to have a federal law. But you know what? A lot of states are doing this already. California has an enormous bill. Maine just did one 2 years ago. New York has one. A lot of states are doing this because they're recognizing, as we should, that this is a key part of our personal privacy. And the people of our state have spoken quite loudly with the constitutional amendment we did a couple of years ago, that they want that privacy protected. And so that's what this is about. And I think with that, I'll just let you tear me apart.
Representative, thank you. Quick question. Did you have any lawyers look at it to see if it violates some Commerce Clause, interstate commerce restrictions?
No, it did not.
Thank you. Okay, Chairman French, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I do have a question. Do you know how many billions of dollars are involved with the sale of that information by the telecommunications companies?
I can't count that high.
So do you think that would drive up the cost of basic service if we were to prevent them from selling?
It may. I have no way of knowing this because I don't know what their revenue streams look like. You know, I mean, but look, I pay for a service. And if it costs me $6 a month for Map My Walk. And if it drove the cost of $7 a month, I don't know. There are all kinds of things that for which we pay, right? And I think that our privacy has a value, and that value far exceeds whatever that little increase in cost is going to be for Instacart, which is a great example because I give them my location so they can deliver me groceries, right? Not for any other reason.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Any other questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much, Representative.
Thank you.
Cameron?
Next, we have Representative Horrigan. Representative Horrigan.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
If we can, Tim, go ahead.
Oh, good. I'm Representative Timothy Horrigan. I represent Stratford County District 6, the towns of Durham and Madbury. So I did the minority report on the floor of the House against this bill, and it was actually I lost by a spectacular margin, but that was then. This is now. You can make your own decision. So I certainly agree. I certainly share the general anxiety about this. We have given away a lot of our privacy to tech providers in many cases with free services, which actually the location data is a key part of what they do. And I'm not necessarily objecting principle to selling things. Certainly it needs to be certainly there are privacy issues, but I don't object per se to buying and selling things. And actually in my political campaigns, I've actually bought Facebook and Google ads precisely because they can geographically target ads. So like I've actually been on both sides of the location services issue, both as a user and as a buyer indirectly of location data. But anyway, so I agree it's a problem. But I think this is a crude, unsophisticated, and flexible attempt to solve an extraordinarily complicated problem. And I'm one of those I'm not one of those technical people, but I'm also agreed that it should best be addressed. And in fact, is being addressed at a federal level. I think it's the prime sponsor just mentioned they didn't consult anybody about the Interstate Commerce law. There's a host of other issues that the people who put together this bill together didn't consult with. And if it's passed in its current form, I think it would accomplish little, if anything, aside from denying Granite State residents, visitors, and businesses access to valuable online location-based services. And the tech industry is well aware of the public's concerns about online privacy, and apps and operating systems both incorporate functionality enabling users to manage how their location data is used. In fact, there's news stories just this morning. Apple's rolling out a new operating system for the iPhone, and I think also for Mac desktop computers like the one I have on my desk that and enhance the privacy protections for the users, because they know people won't use these devices, they're not comfortable using them, and so they need, they understand that they don't want to make a product that users don't want to use. But so people are going to refuse to use products that don't respect their privacy concerns, and so I think they know that. They're well aware of that, and there's they have a lot of conflicting agendas, but yes, they're absolutely well aware of that, and actually, you usually do click through, and unfortunately, a lot of services, that is how they operate. That they collecting location data, they usually a lot of it they do try to make it anonymous, so just good for both the providers and for the users. But that is what they do in many cases. They provide a service, they take their location, they provide the service, and they're selling it to other people who want location data. So that's kind of capitalism at work. And certainly we have a role here in the state legislature for regulating the sharing of location data. HB 384 is not a good way to address this issue, in my opinion. It's going to destroy jobs by driving high-tech firms to other states or countries, and by crippling the growth of the new gig economy. We have finally the fines. They could literally run into the millions of dollars on businesses and individuals who inadvertently violate the vague provisions of this bill. There's also no rulemaking authority in here, so there's a lot of fine distinctions that probably the executive branch and the Joint Committee on Legislative Rules should be working out. They're totally shut out of this process. This bill, if passed, it's just a done deal as is. There's no rulemaking authority. So it's just going to create huge uncertainty for especially for high tech companies. And I think they'll probably avoid doing business in our state if this bill turns out to be as bad as I think it is. So I share the concerns, but I think this is just not a good way to attack the issue. And so I would urge you to find this bill inexpedient to legislate. And that's basically what I have to say about it. So I'd be happy to take any questions if anybody wants to ask me any.
Thank you, Representative. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Representative Mark Pearson. Representative, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, but I'm here to testify against 385.
Well, then hold on for another 20 minutes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let me lower his hand there. Okay, then the next person that I have signed up to speak is Brian Strong. Brian, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Good morning, and can you hear me fine?
Yeah, we can. Go ahead.
Good morning, and my name is Brian Strong. I'm a lieutenant with New Hampshire State Police, and I'm the commander of our Special Investigations Unit. And I was asked to review this bill and weigh in on it. I did not listen to the last hearing on this. That was covered by somebody else, so I have some notes. But listening this morning to the sponsor, the prime sponsor, when he did state that this would not apply to law enforcement, I just wanted to reiterate how important it would be if this bill were to pass, that law enforcement still has the ability through criminal processes to get this information. Some of our investigations are very difficult and laborious, and this would be extremely beneficial as long as that is kept in. And from my understanding this morning, it looks like that would not change. And that's all I have to say.
Great. Thank you very much. Cameron?
Okay, the next person I have is Lisa Mccabe.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Lisa Mccabe here on behalf of CTIA, the Trade Association for the Wireless Communications Industry, in opposition to House Bill 384. This bill would add to the further fragmentation of consumer privacy laws and raises particular concerns because it's technology and sector specific. Consumer privacy protections should apply consistently across all industry sectors, and protections should be consistent for any given type of information. This bill only applies to one type of information, location information, and location information that only a mobile application developer or a telecommunications carrier would have. Thus, it favors certain business models and competitors over others. This bill is unfairly limited to the collection of one type of location data in the online ecosystem. This is something that consumers are unlikely to understand or expect. Additionally, the bill includes a private right of action, which will unfairly expose telecommunications service providers operating in New Hampshire to costly litigation. According to a recent study, plaintiffs rarely recover from lawsuits brought in privacy-related cases. Data indicates that this litigation often leads to a major payday for plaintiffs' attorneys, and that plaintiffs are unlikely to receive material compensatory or injunctive relief through a private right of action. The inclusion of a private right of action will significantly increase the costs of operating mobile applications and services in New Hampshire. Privacy issues are better addressed with a holistic approach that doesn't favor one business model over another in order to lessen any unintended consequences and provide consistent consumer protections. For these reasons, we respectfully request that you report this bill inexpedient to legislate.
Thank you. Thank you. Are you aware of any federal legislation being proposed now to address this?
Yes, there are a number of bills that Congress is working on to look at consumer privacy on a holistic approach, not just looking at one piece of the data, which here is just location data.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much. Cameron?
The next person I have is David Creer.
Hi, good morning, and thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is David Creer. I am Director of Public Policy for the Business and Industry Association, here to speak against House Bill 384. This, as I understand it, would make New Hampshire kind of a standout in the country for this type of location privacy requirements. And interestingly, this bill would require consent every time that your location data is shared. This location data is essential for a lot of functionality that these apps and for these app services. For instance, if you're going to try and do an Uber, every single time you order an Uber, it's going to pop up with a consent message. Do you consent to this every single time? Same thing with, Instacart or any of those services as well. Additionally, a lot of small businesses use this type of data in order to target customers. It doesn't make sense for a coffee shop, for instance, in New Hampshire to target someone in California. That'd be a heck of a commute for a coffee. So these are, this bill would make requirements that would be overly burdensome for both businesses and consumers in the state, and therefore BIA opposes it. Happy to take any questions if you have any.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee members? Senator Gannett?
If you had the coffee on the West Coast, David, it is really good. Might be worth the trip. I'm just kidding. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
The next person I have is Richard Head.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of the committee. My name is Richard Head. I'm the Government Affairs Coordinator for the Judicial Branch. We do not have a position on the policy of the bill, but we do have a request for an amendment, which is reflected in my letter to the committee from last week. And this is an amendment to the effective date of the bill, if this bill is to proceed. And the reason is fairly simple and laid out in my letter. There's actually a statute that deals with effective date of bills. RSA 14:9-A says that every law affecting judicial practice and procedure or establishing or eliminating criminal prohibitions, civil causes of actions or remedies or limitations shall take effect January 1 of the year following. And we're asking that the effective date be modified from 60 days after passage to January 1, 2022. And the reason is pretty straightforward. This bill creates a violation and a fine. And every year at the end of the legislative session, we have to update the uniform charge table, which is used by the courts, law enforcement agencies, and is built into the J1 system when a charge is brought in court, and it creates a uniform system of referencing bills or criminal statutes. And we also have to change our internal Odyssey database. So there are just hundreds of changes that have to be made. They have to be very precise because they law enforcement relies upon it when charging. So for example, in this bill on page 2, line 7, there are actually 5 changes that would be needed on a fairly simple, straightforward bill to the uniform charge table. 1, it has a description. 2, it describes it as a violation. 3 is the fine. 4 is that there's a difference when there are multiple violations. And then 5 would be the fine for the multiple violations. And this is done bill after bill, which is why the statute provides for January 1, 2022 effective date. So with that, I will be happy to answer any questions, but we're asking for that modification.
Very modest request, I would say. Thank you for your testimony today.
Thanks for your time.
The next person I have is Maura Weston. Maura, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can. Go right ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Maura Weston. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today on behalf of the New England Cable and Telecommunications Association. NECTA's members include Atlantic Broadband, Charter, and Comcast. They are New Hampshire's leading broadband and communications providers with over 450,000 customers in more than 184 communities. At the outset of my comments, I would like to unambiguously state that NECTA members have committed publicly to not sell their mobile customers' location data. However, we do oppose HB 384 for 4 main reasons. First, the bill itself is poorly drafted. Definitions are vague and language is overly broad. I won't take the time to go through it, but for example, authorized use is a defined term not used in the bill. Telecommunications carrier is defined in a way that we don't see it defined in other New Hampshire laws. It's inconsistent, et cetera. So we do have concerns with drafting itself. Second, the bill seeks to regulate the sharing of data in a manner which would fundamentally impede the use of popular and essential services in a functioning internet ecosystem. The bill imposes breathtakingly restrictive approaches to location data, which would really hamstring consumers, businesses, and providers alike in conducting the most basic commercial interactions and business functions. Highly desirable and necessary functions such as payment processing, order fulfillment, and fraud protection could not be completed without intrusive and repeated consent requests. The overly broad and inflexible requirements of this bill would really stymie the essential functionality and very operation of services consumers expect. Data sharing for critical functions like network and data security would be impeded for services which are not really optional to a safe and secure internet. Thirdly, as you've heard, New Hampshire would be an outlier among states. Even California, which has been very proactive in the area of consumer privacy protections, does not treat the sharing of data in this extreme manner. Fourth, in addition to the potential harm that this bill could cause, there is long-standing oversight of activities contemplated by this legislation. The online ecosystem is built on a national enforcement platform overseen by the FTC. Our member companies build their compliance around that FTC framework. We know it and we rely upon it. The FTC has a proven framework that protects consumers and allows innovative new services to proliferate. It also has a strong record of oversight. It has brought over 500 privacy and data security enforcement actions against companies both large and small, and often cooperates with the state's attorneys general to enforce consumer protections. Often when you hear examples of where consumers' data was misused or improperly collected, it's most likely the result of information that we're hearing coming out of an investigation and enforcement action by the FTC. It actually demonstrates that there is a cop on the beat and that the existing framework is sound. So taken together, these factors would materially harm New Hampshire's standing among our neighboring states It would have cascading impacts through business sectors, causing negative downstream impacts on New Hampshire's smaller businesses and consumers. Creating a policy framework found only in New Hampshire and nowhere else in our $21.5 trillion economy would have far-reaching negative consequences for our competitiveness and ability to innovate. Internet-based services are essential to businesses, especially in these times, struggling to come back from the pandemic. We should be particularly careful as a state to guard against unintended consequences of HB 384. In conclusion, NECA's members value our customers' privacy and trust. We know that the success of our business depends upon earning that trust. And it is in that spirit that we ask you to recommend HB 384 inexpedient to legislate. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Senator Gannon.
Thank you, Maura. Nice to talk to you again. How you doing?
Nice to see you. Thank you.
Good. And I'm not really a fan of the bill, but just in trying to, so I better understand things. And again, I like when I go buy a Popeyes, it gives me a 20% off coupon. So which is probably a problem for me, but would an opt-in and opt-out be a possibility? Again, I'm not trying to fix the bill. I just want to understand.
Yeah. So my understanding, and I'm not your foremost expert on this, but this is my understanding, Senator, is that for very sensitive data, the FTC requires opt-in, but the framework generally is built on opt-out. And even states that have taken steps toward enacting privacy protections like California have followed that FTC model. And so I think we currently live in a world that is essentially opt-out, and to shift gears, as I pointed out in my testimony, would be detrimental and inconsistent with current federal law.
Thanks, Maura. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
The next person I have is Chris Gilrayne. Chris, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thanks very much, Cameron. Thank you, Chairman French, members of the committee. My name is Chris Gilrayne. I represent TechNet in the Northeast. TechNet is a diverse coalition of companies throughout the innovation economy, ranging from startups to some of the most recognized brands in the world. Here to respectfully offer our opposition to HB 384. A lot of companies, tech and otherwise, talk about friction as a concept in transactions. Basically, the number of steps between when someone identifies what they want and when they get it. How many steps, how many clicks between the person and getting the thing that they asked for. What this bill would do is essentially create friction between people and the state of New Hampshire. If I were to leave Boston this weekend and head to the mountains, something that I'm very much looking forward to doing, under this bill, I would be hit with constant messages telling me that the state of New Hampshire requires that I opt into the processing of location data in order to complete the transaction or service that I'm asking for. Starting when I cross the border into Salem as my directions are interrupted, another pop-up when I'm booking my reservation at Moose Brook State Park, my favorite of the New Hampshire state parks. Again, when I use my payment app to pick up supplies at Hannaford's. Another when I punch in Mccabe in my digital trail map application. Not only will I get these requests from apps that I know and use frequently, but also from third-party processors whose sole job it is to process anonymized data and deliver a specific service like identity verification, fraud prevention, or payment processing. For example, if I'm sitting by my campfire in Gorham and I try and renew my New Hampshire Hike Safe card, I'd likely get a pop-up on the New Hampshire state site with a consent request from a separate company that's going to verify my identity and process my payment. It could be a company that I've never even heard of because they've always operated silently in the background. This could create more friction, more consumer confusion. Of course, if I took care of all this stuff while I was still sitting in Boston, it would be a seamless transaction the way I imagine it was intended when the state contracted for the service. Finally, because this bill includes a private right of action, If the New Hampshire company that produces my trail map app does not hit me with that pop-up consent request while I'm waiting at the trailhead, because maybe they're a small company, they don't have a compliance attorney on hand or an extra developer to implement that consent process, to actually program in that pop-up, there's a good chance that some out-of-state law firm that built its business on the backs of ambiguous statutes like this will descend with a class action lawsuit against them. For these reasons, we ask that the committee not advance HB 384, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
The next person I have is Kyle Baker.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
We can, Kyle. Go ahead.
Morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Kyle Baker with the Rathyoung and Pignatelli, and I'm here on behalf of the Internet Coalition to respectfully oppose House Bill 384. We've already submitted some written testimony, so I'll be very brief, much of which I was going to say has already been said. The Internet Coalition is a national trade organization that represents internet and internet commerce companies in state public policy discussions. The Internet Coalition shares the concerns of others with House Bill 384, which seeks to create an overly broad prohibition of the use of geolocation data. The one thing we wanted to hit on today was that users already have the ability to view app privacy policies before download, decline consent to location data if they wish, and are informed of their ability to control app interactions with their location data before they even choose to download an application onto their smartphone. Following downloads, users can already choose not to allow the sharing of their information at any time, and users may hand tailor their location data settings on most devices, which can be turned off or on at any time. And users can even choose to allow the location data access only when they're using the particular service. Popular ride-sharing apps, mapping, GPS, navigation, educational services, real estate, or even weather apps would all stand to be disrupted by this bill. And since the bill doesn't appear to be limited to New Hampshire residents, anyone traveling through New Hampshire would be subject to continuous pop-ups onto their phone. So we believe that the location data legislation is not needed at this time. There's numerous state and federal laws in place that companies must abide by. And enacting additional laws causes a patchwork of varying mandates that could possibly conflict with these laws, making it extremely difficult, if not impossible, for national and worldwide companies to legally operate across the state lines. So with that, I will let our written testimony speak for itself, and we'd happy to answer any questions.
Great. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Baker.
The next person I have is Maya Mckenzie. Maya, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, good morning to Chairman French and members of the committee, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Maya Mckenzie, and I'm here on behalf of the State Privacy and Security Coalition. This is a group of 30 retail, automobile, tech, telecom businesses, as well as 8 trade associations. And we respectfully oppose House Bill 384 and ask that the committee not move forward with this bill. I should start by saying we appreciate the sponsor's good intentions with drafting the bill, but unfortunately it's too vague and too overbroad to be workable. And in thinking through this bill, we evaluated by 3 criteria, which is improved consumer protection, operational workability, and then clarity, which will prevent frivolous litigation, but also provide consumers with some understanding of their rights. And the bill unfortunately falls short on all of these criteria. States have not established a go-to model for location information, despite previous testimony, because that is both aligned with modern data sharing practices and that's operationally workable, in part due to existing federal regulation that implements a notice and consent requirement. And this adequately provides consumer protections that the bill attempts to, but does not promote. And we recognize that the previous version of the bill permits location data sharing in limited circumstances, but the same concerns that we raised in the House hearing still remain, that this bill is impractical and unworkable as location information is used for beneficial incidental background business functions. One particular use is for how this would impact mobile applications such as the state's lottery app that uses location information to determine whether the lottery function can be provided and offered within the state's geofence boundaries. And so more consents that are required to obtain this location data to determine whether the lottery can be offered will likely have a disparate impact on that service. And consumers will also be totally confused because the bill would not apply equally to state residents, as it only applies to usage or location data sharing that occurs within the boundaries of cities and towns and not unincorporated areas of the state. There are beneficial uses for the visually impaired and blind person community as voice activated technology is used to assist with tasks that will be encumbered by this bill's provisions. But also the bill would allow consumers to sue any mobile app developer, telecommunications carrier, or any person that shared the consumer's location information unless specifically authorized. And so now we open the door, now this bill would open the door to, let's say, a friend of yours send a text with your address to another person. Because that friend sent a text of location, and location is defined very broadly, because that person shared your location information without your explicit consent, that person can now be sued under this proposed bill. So not only would the bill substantially increase litigation risk for businesses, but also private citizens who share location information just to communicate with friends. So for these reasons, this bill is not workable and should not move forward. And we are happy to answer any questions. And then thank you for your consideration and your time.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Cameron?
The last person that I have signed up to speak is Jason Hennessey. Jason, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Wonderful. Thank you. So my name is Jason Hennessey. I'm a resident of Amherst, New Hampshire, and I enthusiastically support HB 384. And unlike most of the other people, I am just here as a citizen who's concerned about our privacy. So just a little bit of background on myself. I have over 15 years in the computer industry and about 10 years as a researcher, completing my PhD in computational sciences and statistics at South Dakota State, and 4 years of postdoctoral studies in computer science at Boston University, and some time in a research group at a technology company. I've published numerous research papers in widely respected peer-reviewed venues on related topics, including security, privacy, and systems-related topics in computing technologies, including some that have received international media attention. So just to give you a little bit of background, at least as of 2019, all of the major mobile wireless carriers are selling your location information to intermediaries who are then free to sell it to anyone they want. If you think there's due diligence or screening happening, then consider that it was discovered that T-Mobile was selling this information to 80 companies who can then sell it to anybody they want. The reason this practice came to light was because there was a county sheriff using this product to keep tabs on state police officers and a judge. Thankfully, he was tried and convicted, but to the best of my knowledge, if a thief, abuser, stalker, or other maldoer were to purchase and use this information in New Hampshire, it would generally be legal. Your location can be used to intrude into many private aspects of your life, including your medical, religious, political, and professional associations. Also keep in mind that these aggregators may also have everyone else's location that you would associate with, so they have the potential to link this information to determine who your friend or other associations are. When this practice came to light, the telecommunications providers said they would end it. As of the next year, they hadn't. It's for this reason that Ms. Weston's commitment that the telecom companies wouldn't sell our location isn't enough. I don't know how large, to address Senator French's question, I don't know how large the location selling economy is, but it must be big for the companies to commit to ending it, but not deliver on that promise. I personally checked with one of these aggregators that they sold it to, a company called Location Smart, and it was able to pinpoint me. Keep in mind that their ability to do this, unlike what one of the previous testifiers said, it does not depend on your cell phone's enabling of location. The telephone companies can track you by virtue of the fact that your phone has to talk to a tower. And they know, because of where that tower is and which direction the antenna is pointing, they have a pretty good idea of where you are. A security flaw on this Location Smart vendor meant that anybody on the internet, anywhere in the world, could access anybody's location in the United States with just a phone number. This includes stalkers, burglars, and other nefarious activities. So even if the ability to purchase someone's location information with a credit card it doesn't scare you enough, because of the security failings of these companies, it was available to anybody. I also want to talk a little bit about what the consent that these companies have. So I checked, if you go onto the AT&T website, you'll notice that their privacy policy is 27 pages. Verizon's is 20 pages. This practice is happening primarily in the dark shadows because people aren't aware of it. So the reason we need legislation is because these companies thrive with lack of informed consent. And a solution is unfortunately not being offered in the market. HB 384 simply codifies the common expectation that these companies are not widely sharing your location information without even getting your consent. I want to address a couple of things I heard. The first one is that we should wait for federal legislation. So I'll let you know that in 2016, the telecom industry spent over $100 million lobbying the federal government. And the next year in 2017 was able to defeat federal legislation that would have prohibited the sharing of location information in addition to other things. So while they say out of one side of their mouth that they want to wait for federal legislation, they're actually working to defeat that on the other side. To address Senator Gagnon's concerns about interstate commerce, I'm not a lawyer, but since the bill only addresses commerce located within the bounds of the state, and the PUC regulates many of the other aspects of the telecom industry, I believe that it should meet Commerce Clause requirements, much as the main bill is intact as far as I'm aware. To address Representative Horrigan's concern, to the best of my knowledge, this would not affect first parties that do advertising based on location like Facebook and Google. This bill only addresses the sharing of your location information. In terms of scaring industry, California has very strong privacy protections, and Silicon Valley, last time I checked, is doing pretty well. So I also wanted to address what I heard from Mr. Creer, the BIA, Mr. Gilrayne from Tenant, and Ms. Mckenzie. These patently false comments that Uber would prompt for every ride you make or every payment you make. This is absolutely false. This legislation only affects companies that rely on secrecy and lack of informed consent. It is explicitly allowed in the bill that as long as you're fulfilling a request made by a person, that it's okay to share that location information. An Uber driver would, of course, be a part of that transaction because you're requesting a ride. If you're making a payment, of course that would be allowed because you're making a payment. That is part of the transaction. Ms. Mckenzie's other example of a friend sharing location is patently false if you just look at the text. It does not, it only applies to telecom companies and mobile app developers of that sort. It does not apply to individuals sharing people's location. And I also wanted to respond to Mr. Baker's comments that you can disable the location sharing. As I stated earlier, that the wireless communications providers can track you regardless of what your cell phone says. So with that, I would just have two recommendations for amendments. The first one is that I would like the Commerce Committee to consider. The first one is that consent would be separate and distinct from any other consents to ensure that consumers are actually aware of this taking place. As I mentioned, there are 20+ page privacy policies by many of these companies, and nobody reads them for the most part. And with that, I would love to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee members? Senator Gannon.
And Mr. Hennessey, nice picture on the beach. I wish I was there. Question for you, because I just, me and a couple of the other senators really just got out of our flip phones and we're probably decades behind. When my kids think they're turning, like at colleges, that you can't leave the premises, so they turn off their locators, you're telling me they can still be tracked?
Oh yeah, the cell phone companies do not rely. Even your flip phones can be tracked. Actually, they do not rely on any on any permissions on your phone.
Okay, thank you.
Any others? Thank you very much for your testimony today.
Thank you.
Senator French,
Cameron?
that is everyone that I had signed up to speak. If anyone else
Good,
wants to
good.
speak, they can raise their hands. I'm not seeing any hands.
Good, then I'll close House Bill, this hearing on House Bill 384 FN. We're down to the last hour. We have 3 bills. We have to get through all 3 today, so I'll open House Bill 385 FN and ask for the prime sponsor to run us through it quickly.
Representative Pearson.
Yes, thank you. And being a committee chair that is usually way behind schedule, I will try to be brief. I am State Representative Mark Pearson from Hampstead, Chairman of the House Health, Human Services, and Elderly Affairs Committee, and many years ago, a volunteer firefighter. House Bill 385 would extend workers' compensation benefits for heart and lung disease in firefighters from age 65 to age 70. In the last session, the bill raced through and with no upper age limit, but it died a COVID death, as many bills did. The bill is necessary from a couple of perspectives. From a municipal perspective, it is an incentive for people to become volunteer firefighters. The number of volunteer firefighters around the state is falling, in some communities falling drastically. And therefore, some small towns are having to hire professional firefighters. And needless to say, that's a cost issue. But personally, studies have been done demonstrating how firefighters suffer from heart or lung conditions at a much higher rate than the general population. And the negative effects sometimes do not manifest for a number of years. In addition, some firefighters are staying on the job longer, and because of some changes made a decade ago to the retirement system, even professional firefighters are now working later into their lives to secure a healthy retirement. Women in the fire service, and it's wonderful to go to a fire in a small town and see numbers of women firefighters. Women firefighters are 7 times more likely to develop breast cancer than women who are not firefighters. So whether it is to respect and acknowledge the impact of prolonged exposure for these men or women, or to show appreciation to those professionals who put their lives on the line, or whether it's to actually save some money by making it not necessary for some towns to hire professionals, we think that the extension of the age limit from 65 to 70 is a good idea. Some people have asked, well, why do we need that? Don't you get on Medicare at age 65? And I had the opportunity to have a lengthy telephone conversation with the Director of Workers' Compensation Division for the state, Danielle Albert. And she reminded me that Medicare is a health issue. Workers' comp is something else. If you're over 65 and have only Medicare but not workers' comp, you'll have a copay and for doctor visits and medical equipment and so on. If the firefighter is off the job due to these work-related issues, workers' comp will pay for that. So the extension from 65 to 70 is helpful and necessary, even though people qualify for Medicare. So that's the Cliff Notes. We're running behind version of a longer speech, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
Well, thank you very much. Any questions from Donna? Senator Susie? No, none. Seeing none. Thank you very much. Cameron?
The next speaker I have is Representative Susie. Representative, you should be able to unmute yourself.
There we go. Can you hear me?
You're on.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the committee for letting me speak. I'm going to be real quick. First of all, for the record, my name is Tim Susie. I represent the city of Concord. I'm a retired firefighter of 29 years out of the city of Nashua, and I do support this legislation. And my good friend, Mr. Pearson, did such a wonderful job of introducing this bill. I just want to bring a few points to light real quick, and then I'm going to be gone. One of the reasons why it came forth is under the current law, the prima facie presumption benefit expires at the firefighter's 65th birthday. And as Mr. Pearson said, a lot of people are retiring later in life, and we're finding that it's more call-in volunteers that are staying on the job longer. So if they retire at beyond 65, they don't get that benefit. The 5-year benefit under Section B of the law is not going to change. That prima facie benefit will still remain at 5 years. It's just bringing that age from 65 to 70. So those folks that do retire later in life will still have that prima facie presumption benefit. So I'm open for questions. Other than that, Mr. Chairman, it was good seeing you. Senator Susie, great seeing you, and enjoy your day.
Only good to see me, but great to see the other senator. Thank you very much, Representative. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you.
The
Cameron?
next speaker is Representative Infantine. There you go.
Yes. Good morning,
Good
Senator
morning.
French. I am the chairman of the House Labor Committee that saw this bill through the House. There were not the votes in the committee to extend this to the death of an employee. I submitted an amendment to increase it 5 years in an effort to get it through. And that's why it is the way it is. Thank you very much, folks.
Great. I appreciate you making that amendment too, so it'll help us on this side.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
I'll see you at the next bill.
Cameron?
The next person I have is Danielle Albert from the Department of Labor. Danielle, you should be able to unmute.
Good morning. Are you able to hear me?
We can.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I'm Danielle Albert. I'm the director of the Workers' Compensation Division, and I will also be brief for the committee. I just want to note that the department has reviewed the language related to the proposed change in this House bill. And we believe we understand the intent behind it, and that we're able to implement it as it is written, or as it is written. And other than that, I just wanted to be available should anyone have any questions, and if there are any, I am happy to answer them.
Thank you so much. Any questions? We're all set. Thank you.
The last person I have signed up to speak is Brian Reel. Brian, you should be able to unmute.
Good morning, and I appreciate your time. I too will be brief. I appreciate you, Chairman French, and members of the committee. I'm Brian Rill. I represent the professional firefighters of New Hampshire and 2,000 active and retired professional firefighters and paramedics. As Representative Pearson spoke to, and again, Representative Infantine, this went through the House Labor Committee, where we worked with the committee to develop an amendment to this bill that was what I believe to be a fair compromise. I think it's extremely important that we think about the health and wellness of the firefighters that represent this state. And I am fully in support of this bill as amended. And also I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you for your time.
And thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Cameron?
Senator French, that was everyone I had signed up to speak. I'm looking for hands now.
Don't look too hard.
I don't see any.
And I'll close this hearing on House Bill 385. And we'll open House Bill 448. And we'll ask for the prime sponsor.
Okay, that is Representative Sullivan. Representative? You should be able to, there you go.
Can you hear me now?
We can, go right ahead.
Very good. Good morning, Chairman French and Senator Susie. I'm Representative Brian Sullivan, representing Sullivan County District 1. I serve as ranking member on the House Labor Committee, and I'm prime sponsor of HB 448. In New Hampshire and every other state in the Union, all private sector employees are covered by the Federal Occupation Safety and Health Administration, OSHA. Safety and health standards for public sector employees are covered by the New Hampshire Department of Labor with its own set of standards. In the summer of 2016, Tom Wooten, a public works employee in Northfield, died on the job. Following Tom Wooten's accidental death, his family was disappointed with the lack of detail in the New Hampshire Department of Labor's investigation. They were left with far too many unanswered questions regarding Tom's death. Through a multi-year crusade by Tom's daughter, Samantha, House Bill 406 was passed by the House and Senate and signed by the governor in 2019. HB 406 provided for more timely reporting and a more thorough investigation of death and serious injury on the job for public sector employees. HB 448, the bill presently before us, is the next logical step in addressing safety and health of public sector employees. HB 448, if passed, establishes a study committee that would do the following. It would compare safety and health standards that the Occupational Safety and Health Administration applies to private sector employees to the New Hampshire Department of Labor standards that are applied to New Hampshire public sector employees. It would determine what impact the adoption of OSHA standards would have on public sector employees. It would study the degree to which New Hampshire public sector employers may be applying standards that exceed the standards currently applied by the New Hampshire Department of Labor. Finally, it would study the amount of funding, that's money from the federal government, funding that the U.S. Department of Labor would provide to New Hampshire to support the implementation of a state private sector OSHA plan. Last year, I sponsored a bill that would have committed New Hampshire to creating and adopting a state plan for public sector OSHA. I acknowledge that that bill may have been premature. In moving the bill through the legislative process, it became apparent that there are many unanswered questions about the impacts of a state OSHA plan. We really needed to answer these questions prior to deciding if we should commit to a state plan. This study committee bill will provide the information necessary for the legislature to decide if a full commitment to a public sector state OSHA plan is appropriate for New Hampshire. It is a 2-year study commitment that gives the committee, and more importantly, the New Hampshire Department of Labor, until November of 2022 to complete the study. During the hearing for this bill in the Labor Committee, Deputy Commissioner Rudy Ogden of the Department of Labor testified that this study would be worthwhile for the department, regardless of whether we eventually decide to move New Hampshire to adopt a public sector OSHA plan. It would cause the department to do a comprehensive review of its safety and health standards while comparing them to the OSHA standards. He further testified that it would allow the department to advance the process of improving safety standards for public sector workers. The Department of Labor needs us to direct them through this bill to undertake this study. It's too much of a commitment to take on without a legislative mandate. I understand that the Deputy Commissioner Ogden is not available to testify, but is sending another department member to speak for the Labor Department. I believe it must be Danielle Albert. I emphasize that this is a study committee that will allow us to make a fully informed decision if public sector OSHA legislation is proposed in 2023. It is the next logical step towards reducing the incidence of injuries and fatalities among public sector workers. I'm happy to take any questions the committee may have.
Thank you. Do you think you'll have a problem finding 3 House representatives to work on this?
I don't think so. I'm certainly willing, and I believe the committee chair, Infantine, is interested as well. So
Do you think you can find 3 senators?
I guess that would be a question that I would turn back to you. And if that is not the case, then an amendment to adjust the number of senators, I think, would be appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Senator it's Senator Kavanaugh.
Oh.
So I jumped on.
You're back.
I jumped on with the phone. Sorry about that. I'm back.
Nice.
Yeah. Would you take a committee amendment to reduce that to 1 senator? I don't mind serving on that if it's 1 senator.
Sure. We're going to take it up next week. Just get that in.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Representative.
Thank you.
Okay. Next is Representative Infantine.
Hello again. This is Representative Infantine, Hillsborough 13, Chairman of the Labor Committee. I do support this legislation. I've spent my entire professional career as an insurance agent, and unfortunately have had 3 individuals die in companies I insured. And safety is very important. I'm also an OSHA 10 certified individual. And it bothers me that any private company would get a fine for using inappropriate means around a trench, yet a public employee doesn't have to follow the same rules. This makes no sense to me. I understand we cannot adhere every single OSHA standard to every part of the municipal employees. Obviously, OSHA would say you should not run into a burning building, but firefighters do that. The House leadership was not really interested in having a lot of study committees. They were concerned with the COVID situation. We would have problems getting people to get together and to do their work. As Representative Sullivan said, I will have agreed to sit on this committee. Also, if the senators would like to reduce it to 1 senator, I'm happy to work with my good buddy, Senator Kavanaugh. So I do support this bill and hope the Senate can see their way passing this study committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sounds good. Thank you, Representative. Everyone set? Cameron?
Okay, the next person I have is Samantha Wooten. I don't see a Samantha Wooten. I do have an Allison Wooten. If that's the correct individual, could you raise your hand so I know to bring you in? Okay, I have someone on the phone here. All right, if you unmute yourself, could you identify who you are on the phone? You're going to want to dial *6, I believe, to unmute yourself.
Good morning. My name is Samantha Wooten.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman French and committee members. I sincerely appreciate your time and attention today, and I want to thank you for allowing me to speak before you again. I'm here in support of House Bill 448, an act establishing a committee to study and compare federal Occupational Safety and Health Act standards with the safety and health standards that New Hampshire Department of Labor uses for public sector employees. July 21st, 2016, my life was forever changed. My father, Tom Wooten, worked for the town of Northfield's Department of Public Works, and on this day, the employees were moving a trailer with a bucket and a backhoe. There were 2 equipment operators and 2 flaggers. My dad was one of the flaggers. While approaching the end location, my father was fatally pinned between the trailer and the loader. It's still unclear how and why my father was caught in between the 2 machines. The accident crushed my father's pelvis, causing internal injuries that killed him. When my father passed away, I knew right then and there that I needed to do something to prevent these types of situations from happening to someone else. Since that day, I changed my career path and went to school for my master's degree in occupational safety. I am now employed as a construction safety consultant and see day in and day out the hazards that construction workers face. And these hazards do not care if you are public sector or private sector. Public sector and private sector employees should not be classified into groups. They are both human beings and they are someone's loved one. I would have thought that since this accident resulted in the tragic and untimely death of my dad, that there would have been a thorough investigation or potentially a root cause analysis. I was proven wrong. I do not place blame on the town of Northfield or the Department of Labor. I believe they did the best they could with the funding and administrative support they had at the time. If the state of New Hampshire, more specifically the town of Northfield, were held to the same standards, I may know what have happened to my dad. Again, I understand the Department of Labor did not have the capacity to do an accident reconstruction at the time of his death. The lack of investigation made me feel as though my father's life meant nothing, and it was somehow not as important as a private sector employee where OSHA has jurisdiction. If this was private sector, OSHA would have been there almost immediately, beginning an investigation and implementing a plan of action to help ensure that a tragic accident would not happen again. Throughout my journey since my father's passing, I have met so many incredible individuals who work tirelessly to ensure the safety of others. Safety in the occupational stance is oftentimes pushed to the side because it comes with an expense or may stall a deadline. But I truly want you all to take some time to think about the ones you love. Is there a price you would pay to ensure they returned home safely every day? This is clearly a painful topic for me to discuss, and it is even more painful to live my life without seeing my dad's bright eyes and handsome smile. I'm using my voice today and every day because I do not want another daughter to feel the heartache I feel on a daily basis. It's time for action, and it needs to be clear that every worker, in whatever capacity they are employed, should have the same basic safety rights. Thank you again for your attention.
Thank you, and I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank you very much.
Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Okay, I see Allison Wooten also has her hand raised. Allison, you should be able to unmute yourself. Allison, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay. I was actually just raising my hand because I knew my daughter was traveling, and I wasn't sure she was going to be in a spot she could speak. She spoke eloquently for the whole family, and we're all in support of this bill.
Thank you very much.
Okay, the only other person I have signed to speak is Susie Nord. There she is. All right, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Can you everybody hear me okay?
We can.
Terrific. So, Mr. Chair and the committee, thank you very, very much for giving me this opportunity to support, to register my support for House Bill 448. My name is Susie Nord, and I work for the National Council for Occupational Safety and Health. We are a nonprofit that does training and advocacy around worker health and safety. And I want to acknowledge that the timing for this bill is pretty special because tomorrow, April 28th, is the 50-year anniversary of the implementation of the Occupational Safety and Health Act. The implementation of the act. So tomorrow, OSHA is 50 years old. And I want to take just a moment to take you back to where we were in 1970 when that act was passed, because I think it's really important, and we'll speak a little bit about why public sector workers and all workers need this protection. At that time, nobody was tracking workplace fatalities. However, the estimate is that approximately 30,000 workers every year were killed in some sort of tragic incident, traumatic incident. This doesn't include people who might have died from occupational fatality or for occupational illnesses such as black lung or other illnesses that take time. And it does not include injuries, which are much larger by a factor I can't even begin to imagine. However, now the most recent numbers that we have are from 2019, and it is the best estimate we have, there's still probably some underreporting because there are so many workers like public employees who are not covered. However, in 2019, there were 5,000 occupational fatalities from traumatic incident. And what that really shows is that having OSHA made a difference in the lives of 25,000 people's families every single year for 50 years. So that's a lot of people who are not dead, although they may now be, obviously, 50 years later. But that is, and all of the families and all of the people who love them and care about them. And it's really important to understand that the other thing that this number tells us is that the vast majority of occupational fatalities are preventable. These are not, oh shoot, what happened? It's an accident, somebody died. That is not the case. These are predictable in the vast overwhelming majority of cases that somebody could be injured or killed. And we know this, and I want to use trench fatalities because Representative Infantine mentioned them. We are very well aware of what happens when someone digs a trench. And there are very, very clear OSHA standards that tell construction workers what needs to be done to protect the health and well-being of the workers in that trench. There's shoring, there's making sure that the workers can get out a certain amount of distance. I won't bore you with the details because I'm not an expert anyway. But right now, as Representative Infantine so astutely noted, any public sector worker, DPW worker, or the road agent for a town does not have to do that. And truthfully, even with those statutes, companies that choose to shortchange because of cost or time, hundreds of people die every year in trench incidents. In fact, you may have seen about 2 or 3 years ago, 2 people were killed. They were working for the city of Boston, and Boston actually created a municipal statute that they won't hire anybody who has these kinds of on their record, that they don't have trench deaths or any kind of health and safety citations on their record anymore, because they acknowledge that if the company is doing the right thing, those workers did not have to die. And I would say that if the town of Northfield had had the proper training, they would not have put Tom Wooten in a situation that ultimately killed him. And I find that heartbreaking. I know Allison Wooten, I know Sam Wooten, and I know how much they love him, and they still do to this day, and how much pain that they've gone through. And that's why I'm here. That's why I'm fighting to get this bill passed, because the truth is that the families are the ones who bear the cost when a business decides or a municipality decides to take a shortcut. And the insurance company, which ultimately then in the case of a municipality or the state or any other public entity is the taxpayers, because their workers' comp costs go up, and it goes on and on and on. So what we're doing is we're not, and you really cannot put a dollar value on someone's life. However, that's what we're trying to do here. And we need to understand that this bill will help us get that dollar value. And I am confident that that dollar value will make sense to everyone, that obviously we need to do this and should have done this years ago. So, and with that, I will stop because I am somewhat passionate about this issue. And I just ask you to please support this bill and do the right thing.
Thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you for allowing me.
Cameron?
Okay, that is everyone that I had signed up to speak. If there's anyone else, they can raise their hand. On the phone, that's *9. I don't see any.
Okay, then I'll close the hearing on House Bill 448. And we will open the hearing on House Bill 593 FN. If the prime sponsor is with us,
I believe he is Representative Wilhelm. There you are. You should be able to unmute.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can. Go right ahead.
Great. Good morning, Chairman French and honorable members of the Senate Commerce Committee. For the record, my name is Matt Wilhelm. I proudly serve as a state representative for the 42nd District of Hillsborough County, which includes Manchester's Central Business District, covering downtown and our historic mill yard. I'm here this morning to introduce House Bill 593 to require a food delivery service to enter into an agreement with a food service establishment or food retail store before offering delivery service from that restaurant. While food delivery has become a real lifeline for many New Hampshire restaurants during the COVID-19 pandemic, third-party companies should not offer delivery service without express written consent of the restaurant. I was moved to introduce HB 593 when a constituent and a downtown small business owner, Alex Horton of Cafe Lorraine, shared her frustration on social media last fall. She said, "Please note, we do not take orders on Grubhub, DoorDash, Postmates, or any other delivery service. If you place an order through a third-party site, we cannot see it, and we will not be able to fill that order. Thank you for your patience, and please know that these companies have listed us without our permission." According to an article dated February 24th, 2020 on Manchester Inklink, which I can forward to all of you via email, several other Queen City restaurateurs expressed similar frustration, including a co-owner of North End Bistro, who said, "Last year, when we closed for renovations, a DoorDash driver showed up to pick up an order for items that hadn't been on our menu since we first opened. The thing is that we didn't have an account with them, so we didn't have customer information. All I could do was complain on the DoorDash site and explain why we were upset about it." She also shared another story about a driver showing up 40 minutes late for a delivery. They ended up making new food for that customer, but they got a bad review online. And then when she reached out to Uber Eats, she said that Uber Eats said that unless the customer contacted them, they couldn't refund the customer. So she had to do it, and then they lost the cost twice, plus they lost a potential customer. There are other restaurants that have experienced this, including Roots Vegan Cafe and Juice Bar in Dover just a couple weeks ago. They shared on Instagram, "It's come to our attention that we've been added to Grubhub and or DoorDash. We didn't do this. We cannot fulfill these orders because we're only open on select days for the time being. Our apologies to everyone who has been placing Roots orders through these third-party delivery sites. We had no idea this was happening until today." This is really an urgent issue facing small businesses all across the state who are under enormous pressure due to the pandemic. Bad online reviews can lead directly to a decrease in orders, which can lead to a restaurant's closure, especially in these challenging and uncertain economic times. I urge you to send House Bill 593 to the full Senate with a unanimous recommendation of ought to pass so that we can stand up for small business owners across the state who've been taken advantage of by these out-of-state tech companies who frankly will gladly turn a profit on the backs of New Hampshire's restaurant owners, even if it tarnishes their reputation or puts a few out of business in the process. We need to put power back in the hands of small business owners to make decisions that are right for their restaurants. Thanks, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Representative. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony today.
So, Senator French, I have two individuals signed up. However, I don't see either of them here. If they are here under another name, they can raise their hand. The two individuals I have to speak were Tom Boucher and Elliott Axelman. Oh, it looks like Tom's here. Okay. Tom, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yep. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. Thank you. Chairman French and members of the committee, thanks for allowing me to speak. My name is Tom Boucher. I'm the CEO and owner of Great New Hampshire Restaurants, which includes T-Bones, 6 locations, Copper Door, 2 locations, and CJ's Great West Grill, all in New Hampshire from Laconia down to Salem. You know, I testified in the House on this as well, and I feel very passionate about this bill because We were victims of these third-party delivery services. When I say victims, I mean they were putting our brands that we've worked very hard to build over 30 plus years on their websites, marketing our brands to profit off of our business for their business without our permission. We routinely not only called them, emailed them multiple times. Specifically, it was Grubhub and DoorDash. And it got to the point where I was just fed up. And in January of 2019, we filed a lawsuit against both of them to cease and desist of using our brands on their websites without our permission or contractual agreement. You can Google that. There was an article in the Union Leader about it. So we eventually they settled and told us that they would take us down and would never put us back up there without our permission. So they did take us down, and we have not been back up since. And let me explain the reasons why we didn't want to be on their sites. And I came in a little late, but I think the representative covered it pretty well. That once the food leaves our building, we have zero control over the quality of it. We have absolutely no control on how long it's going to take to get to the customer, whether the food would actually be tampered with, which you can read articles about that as well, that there have been drivers that have taken a little French fry from one of the bags to enjoy on their drive over. And equally, they're not an employee of ours. So we have no control over the quality of the employee that's delivering our food that we pride ourselves on making in a safe and a very high quality manner. So to that extent, we just didn't want to engage in that. And then for the companies that do want to engage in it, they charge anywhere from 20 to 30% charge that is passed on to the consumer. So I actually did a fake order. One was from TGI Fridays and one was from Backyard Brewery in Manchester. For an ordinary cheeseburger from TGI Fridays, it came out to $21, just one cheeseburger. From Backyard Barbecue, it was north of $28. And, you know, as a business, we don't even know that that's what they're getting charged. And it just makes us look bad. It makes us look like we're gouging them. So, lastly, I'll leave you with this. We actually did engage Uber Eats during this pandemic because we knew there was demand for delivery. And that lasted about 4 weeks. And the reason is for the exact reasons that I stated at the beginning of my testimony. The quality of the drivers, the timeliness of the drivers was horrendous. And the consumers out there think it's us. They truly think that we are in complete control of how long their order takes to get to the consumer. And we're not. Their orders were missed, as I think the representative stated. Not only were they missed, but we had to remake it. So we had to eat that cost. So it lasted 4 weeks and we dropped them. So, you know, we're in the food business. We're in the business of face-to-face waiting on customers and providing a hospitality environment. Delivery, I'm not against delivery, but it's more for fast casual and places that are set up to deliver that kind of food. But a $32 seared scallop from Copper Door is going to arrive at $50 in a package that it's just not representative of who we are. So I guess I would ask for a unanimous recommendation to send this to the full Senate to support this bill to prevent these outside tech companies from taking advantage of small businesses.
Thank you, Mr. Boucher. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so like I said, the only other person I had signed to speak was Elliott Axelman, who I do not see here. If anyone else would like to speak, you can raise your hand on the phone. That's *9 again. I'm not seeing anything, Senator French.
Then I'll close the hearing on House Bill 593 FN. And that's it for today on bills to be heard. Senator Gann is not with us right now. It looks like we'll be executing all the bills next week. If you have amendments bringing it forward on any of them, let's get them in and we'll be ready to go next week. Does that sound reasonable to everyone? Good.
Sounds good to me.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Capital moves.
We have a motion from Senator Susie, seconded by Senator Kavanaugh. Senator Susie,
Yes.
Senator Bradley,
Yes.
Senator Kavanaugh,
Yes.
and Senator French says yes. Thank you all very much for sitting in today. Thank you to the staff. See you next week. Be ready.